Hello and welcome back to the latest Liverpool Echo Blood Red podcast. I'm Matt Addison with Paul Gorst and David Lynch, both alongside me. We're going to talk through the latest in the top four race. We'll chat about the Liverpool midfield as well. At the end, we'll pick our teams to face Wolves, but we shall start, Gorsty, with Selhurst Park and Crystal Palace. You made the trip down there. There wasn't a great deal of excitement. It's not a great view, I don't think, from the Crystal Palace press box either. So probably not the greatest afternoon that you've had this season. There wasn't a great deal going on apart from both teams hitting the crossbar. But what did you make of the match?
No, it certainly wasn't the best afternoon this season, but it wasn't the worst, which probably sums up how bad the season's been. Yeah, it's like watching a match through a postbox at Selhurst Park. I remember me and Lynchy down there, 2019, was it, Lynchy, when Firmino gets the late winner and someone in the press box grabbed me down the shoulders and wildly celebrated Liverpool's winner. And it may have been David Lynch, I'm not sure. I can't confirm it.
Not guilty, I'm professional at all times, do you mind?
But there were certainly no winners to be found on Saturday night. It was a dour, drab affair. Difficult really to criticise Liverpool too much because you're wary of going too heavy-handed with them after Tuesday night. But just felt like it, just one moment of quality might have won that game for Liverpool, and they could have got away with a scruffy 1-0 win, and we'll say no more about it and move on. But unfortunately, we were forced to settle for a 0-0, and the chance to really turn the screw on Tottenham was gone, and then they go and beat Tottenham the next day. They go and beat Chelsea the next day, and leaves Liverpool with more work to do, doesn't it? I still think they're very much in the thick of this top four battle, and I am behind now with two games in hand, and they've still got to play Tottenham at Anfield at the end of April. That game is going to be huge. It'll be interesting to see how Newcastle kind of pick themselves up after that Carabao Cup defeat. But in all honesty, Newcastle haven't been in great form since probably around just after Christmas time, I'd guess. So I honestly think now this top four battle is probably just between Liverpool and Spurs. If that's not too dismissive of Newcastle, hopefully not too many magpies listening to this podcast. But it was a disappointing night. Nothing really to talk about other than the kind of weird, creative ways Liverpool were trying to gift Palace chances in the first half. Matip was out of sorts again. I thought Trent had a really poor game, and Naby Keita was probably the worst offender of the lot. He only lasted 45 minutes. He got booked. He looked totally disinterested, and it was just a very poor game. There's just no quality on show whatsoever from either side.
Yeah, it felt very much like Jordan Henderson blocking a shot that was going in from Trent kind of summed up the afternoon, really. I mean, it was just one of those days, wasn't it, for Liverpool? But of course, he mentions there the sort of Tottenham-Liverpool race, Lynchy. That was what I was going to ask you about, actually. It does very much feel like it's between those two teams from this point on. And there is still 15 games to go. I think Tottenham have played 2 games more than Liverpool. I think that's right. So it does kind of feel like that's the battle to get into the top four will boil down to that. It's just a case of, as we've been saying for a little while now, can Liverpool put together enough of a run to be able to overtake them?
Yeah, that's it. I think Gorsty's right to say you don't want to dismiss Newcastle out of the picture completely, but I think because they've played everybody once now and everybody's wary of the fact they've got a bit more quality than they used to, and they know how to manage them a little bit better. And I think that Newcastle being asked week by week now to sort of break teams down. And I think, they've made great strides in the last year or so, but not enough to sort of start doing that on a consistent basis. They prefer to be the underdog in games and sort of struggling with that change in what's been expected of them. So, yeah, I think Liverpool and Tottenham are the two there. I think, the gap to Tottenham is only 3 points if Liverpool win the 2 games in hand. I know, throughout the season, picking up wins has not been particularly easy. So, that gap does look big. But I think about the Crystal Palace result as maybe, I'm maybe clinging to the positives here, but I do see it as a little bit of a step forward in some ways. I think, we on this podcast, we're talking, weren't we, after the Brentford, Brighton, Wolves, was that 3 consecutive away defeats where Liverpool got absolutely thumped not too long ago. And I think we all said, let's just have some solidity as a starting point. Let's just stop conceding goals if possible and try and be a bit more solid. And I don't think Liverpool were perfect in that regard. I think there was a few individual errors at Palace, but it's a 3rd clean sheet on the bounce. That is something to hang on to. And I think that point could look like a good point if Liverpool win these next 2 home games, particularly as one of those against Manchester United. I think that give you a big big lift, given they've really improved this season. So, for that to be a good point, I think they've got to go and win the next two. But it could be 2 wins, a draw, and then another 2 wins, and all of a sudden that looks, the picture looks a lot brighter, and you're breathing down the neck of a Tottenham side who, even though they're sort of hitting a little bit of form of late, have been massively inconsistent themselves this season. I think Liverpool can give themselves a chance, and also just to say on the Palace result as well, they've not won in 9 now, I think it is, in all competitions. But, you look back through those results, and there's draws with Manchester United, there's draws with Newcastle, draws with Brentford and Brighton, who have been in, sort of really good form of late. So, they're no mugs Palace, and it's a difficult place to go, in a place where Liverpool, when they have won there in recent years, and they've won there a lot, there's been quite a few last-minute winners in there, because it's always been a difficult game. So, I think you can, sort of cling to the upsides here and think that can be a positive point. But like I say, Liverpool have now got to build on it, and to win these next 2, I think, will be just massive for the season as a whole.
Yeah, we've said it a few times, haven't we, over the last few weeks? As much as Liverpool need to get onto a bit of a winning run, it is the top 4 race. You don't have to win every single game, Gorst. You can afford to have the odd little bit of drop points here and there. And I suppose, Tottenham, only a week or 2 back, got absolutely hammered by Leicester. It's not as if they're on a particularly long winning run either.
No, exactly. I suppose that's what, I had the chance to speak to Andy Robertson after the game, and that was one of the things kind of put to him. Basically, it's what separates a team who's going for the title for a team who's challenging for the top 4, just that consistency of results. And one of the questions I asked him was, do you think it'll help that, this is a team that has got experience of really picking up points at the business end of the season? If you look back to a couple of years ago, they won 8 of the last 10 and drew the other 2. And I've written a piece this afternoon, and generally Liverpool have been really strong in the months between March and May. Not too many points dropped at all. I can't remember the exact statistics now off the top of my head, but they are really strong when it matters in the final couple of months. They've got a few more games to play than normal because of the World Cup. I think 2 years ago, they played 12 between March and May, and the last season was 10 possibly, but this season we've got 15, still 15 games left to go. So I suppose it's just about time and you run it. If you're gonna get rolling on one, and it's disappointing results on Saturday. We can't really, deny that too much. But it was a clean sheet. 7 points from 9 now, which is decent when you think Liverpool, had to go to Newcastle, who are absolutely flying. They've only lost 1 all season prior to that defeat, and Everton, when we were talking a couple of weeks ago of them actually maybe even coming to Anfield as potential favourites, that looks quite laughable now when you've got the hindsight of the results in the game itself. But yeah, they're steadily building towards something, I'd say. I still think they've got obviously a huge game Wednesday, and then an absolutely massive one on Sunday against Manchester United coming to Anfield. Still going to play Tottenham as well, haven't they? I think that will be the crucial one. Fulham are still going to come to Anfield as well, I think. So there's still loads of big games in there for Liverpool. It's just about time in that run. If they can start to get bodies back consistently, if Darwin Nunez is cleared to play on Wednesday, for example, Ibrahim Konate, if he's back in the next week or 2, Luis Diaz will be a huge boost when he comes back. Maybe they've still got enough muscle memory and enough experience in that squad to put together a run when it really matters. Because, as you say, Matt, it's not, given the kind of nature of the fact that they're only going for top 4, it's not necessarily where teams are going to be putting together, 8 to 10 wins on the bounce, is it?
Yeah, lots of big games left. Lots of them at Anfield as well. A lot of them have tended to be away from home in the first half of the season. So that's certainly something to look forward to for the next few games. But not for the first time, Lynch. We've got to talk about the Liverpool midfield after the weekend and the big week ahead. Obviously, Naby Keita, the obvious one, given he got took off at half-time. It kind of summed up his Liverpool career, really, I think, for me. He just was given the opportunity, didn't really do a great deal to keep hold of it. He wasn't the only one, of course. We've spoken at length about a variety of midfielders. This is not me, by any means, just picking on him, but it was a particularly disappointing performance, I think, from his perspective, when you think he's probably not got long left in his Liverpool career to make any more of an impact.
Yeah, I've criticised Keita before. I did sort of feel a little bit sorry for him for Saturday, in the sense that I felt the reason the only reason he got hooked was not because he was performing a million miles worse than the other midfielders. I don't think anyone was playing particularly well in that position, to be honest. But I think the problem was obviously that yellow card and wanting to not lose a player. And he probably got that because he was being a lot more aggressive than the other midfielders. I think he was attempting more challenges, even if they weren't quite coming off. At least he was trying to put his foot in and make things happen. But as has been the case for much of his career at Liverpool, just not quite coming off, not quite there in terms of the pace, in terms of getting to the ball, and sort of gets a book in and sort of sums up. It ends up being a sort of a disastrous 45 for him, really, doesn't it? Because he gets dragged off after that, having not played particularly well. But like I say, I think the other two players in there didn't play particularly well either. This is going to happen, isn't it? Week to week, we know that midfield situation is probably not going to get any better between now and the end of the season. You've just got to grin and bear it. I think the one thing that hurt Liverpool was maybe not having Darwin Nunez in the team. I know obviously we're talking about midfield now, but I just think all they've got to do between now and the end of the season is paper over those cracks in midfield. And the way you do that is by scoring goals. And Darwin Nunez has been in great form recently. I think he's really sort of got over that post-World Cup slump. And, he's just constantly threatening, constantly keeping the opposition backline busy. And you look at the Newcastle performance is a really good example of a way of, Liverpool didn't play well at all, but they scored goals at the right times. And, they just weren't able to do that at Palace. And it was just, the performance just carried on in a bit of a muddle. So, you'd like to think hopefully his layoff is not too long and they can get him back in and just name some sort of consistent attack regularly, because they need to do that. They need to just be scoring goals together and playing together and linking up and finding that fluency there. Because if they do that, they can cover for the fact that the midfield is just probably going to be a bit of a difficult watch between now and the point at which they can add to it.
Yeah, I think the fact that James Milner was probably the best of the three, the age he is, and the fact that he doesn't always play in midfield, he can often pop up at right back, kind of sums up the situation. But I think the attack, Gorsty, is a really key point. If Liverpool can get into the top four, that's going to play a huge part. I know you mentioned the Andy Robertson chat before. I know you spoke to him about Diogo Jota as well. It kind of feels like both of those players, Jota and Darwin Nunez as well. If they can kind of get into a little bit of form, you can start to paper over the cracks. Like you said before, actually, in terms of just in that kind of game, if Liverpool could have just got themselves ahead, it probably would have been a 1-0 game.
Yeah, I think it's gone massively under the radar, to be honest, how much Liverpool have missed Jota. He basically missed all season, hasn't he? He had a brief run of availability between sort of early September and then that injury against Man City, which was October the 16th. Obviously got the hamstring injury in July in Singapore or Thailand. And hasn't really got going as a result of it. Obviously that calf injury completely wrecked his World Cup as well. And I think Liverpool obviously that's impacted them, but I think not having Jota being able to go to the World Cup has probably had an adverse impact on Liverpool in terms of that would have just given him a chance to get some fitness, really, from Liverpool's perspective. He might not necessarily have won the World Cup and been Portugal's main man, but it certainly would have helped from the Reds' perspective. So that has been a massive shame, I think, for all the talk of Liverpool missing Sadio Mane this season, which has been a little bit kind of lazy analysis for me. I think Liverpool have missed Jota just as much. 15 Premier League goals last season, 21 in all competitions. He's only played 300 odd minutes. I think there's only Curtis Jones and Naby Keita who played less than him this season, who were kind of squad regulars. Nat Phillips is someone you might not necessarily include in that list. So he's been a massive loss, hasn't he? And I think I asked Klopp a couple of weeks ago, are you a little bit concerned that Jota comes back and you're kind of looking towards the summer for him to really start showing his best, as in might be a little bit of a write-off of the season for him? And he said no. He said, because of how smart Diogo is and kind of player he is, we're not too worried about him not performing immediately. But I think, being realistic, it's probably too much to expect Jota to just come flying up the traps and being back to his absolute best that he was at times last season, really. So we might have to wait and see before we see the best of him again, which is obviously not ideal, but something that Liverpool are going to have to deal with. The same goes for Luis Diaz when he finally comes back as well, because obviously he hasn't played since the Arsenal game in early October. Underwent surgery in December. So are we looking at these two players now who aren't going to be at their best until next season? Then a lot of responsibility falls to Nunez, to Salah, and to Cody Gakpo, and perhaps to a lesser extent Roberto Firmino. So it's difficult, really. Liverpool have been massively hamstrung by injuries all season, and I think they've hugely missed Jota. You look at in terms of just the way things have fallen for him. He hasn't scored now since April last year, so it's just been massively disappointing that they haven't been able to have him fit and ready to go more often.
Yeah, he's
just to come in on the Jota point. Actually, I agree. Sort of, he's looked rusty, hasn't he, since he's come back in? And the point about him not scoring a while is an interesting one, because you think Liverpool have definitely missed him, but it's weird the scoring run he's not on now. So it's apparently his last 24 appearances for Liverpool. But I saw a really good tweet the other day from Michael Reed, who I don't know if people should follow him. He's really good on his statistics. He works for Opta, I believe, and he said. Someone had mentioned that he hadn't scored in his last 24 appearances for Liverpool, and he said in his defence he has 9 assists in that time, has only started 11 of the 24 games and only completed 90 minutes in 3, which sort of just shows you that he has been contributing as much when he has been in the team and when he's got minutes on the pitch, but that mostly it's just that period's just been wrecked by injury. Particularly from the entirety of this season, he's barely played at all. So. He's going to be massive, isn't he, when he gets back to full fitness? You just hope between now and the end of the season that, Klopp's right to hopefully think that he doesn't need that time to acclimatise and get back up to full speed, and that he can just have a bit of a say, because it goes back to the point I made about papering over the cracks with the attack. He'd be a big part of that, because he's such a massive goal threat and has been for Liverpool for a long while.
I suppose that links in with what you were saying as well, Lynch, about Darwin Nunez and the importance of getting him back, because if you've got Nunez, Gakpo and Salah to start, and then Jota can be eased back in, Roberto Firmino as well has had a bit of an injury recently, he can be eased back in, suddenly the attack looks a lot better when you've got the 3 who are actually fully fit and sort of in match sharpness, if you like. The other 2 can then kind of do bits off the bench, and Jota for half an hour off the bench is a big weapon for Liverpool to have.
Well, that's it. If you get to sort of late in the game, the hour mark, say, and you're 0-0 in the game, and you've got a genuine option on the bench that you think has got the possibility to win it for you, that's huge. And you saw how many games did Liverpool win late on during the run-in last season. The masters of that, or they were at that point. Maybe they can sort of rediscover that touch once they've got those real attacking options there. It's also sort of helpful, even if you win in a game, a tight one, you're 2-1 up, and it's difficult. If you're refreshing your front line and you've got new people coming in who've got the legs to press and really keep the ball at the other end of the pitch, the defending starts in the front, doesn't it? Especially in Klopp teams. So I think, just having those options, no matter what the game state is, it's just massively helpful to have fresh attackers to bring off the bench.
I think that sort of ties in as well, Gorsty, with what we said about Tottenham before. You'd look at them and what they're doing at the moment. When you think of like what you mentioned before, it's not just, obviously Jota coming back, Konate, Thiago, Diaz. Liverpool have still got big players to sort of add into their squad and make themselves better, where maybe Newcastle and Tottenham and 1 or 2 of the other teams are they are what they are. Liverpool have still got a couple of bits, hopefully, to cling on to.
Yeah, but Liverpool have had that all season, haven't they? It feels like, what you would have constituted Liverpool's strongest 11 in August, I don't think we probably had them available at any one point this season, have they? Maybe that's changed these days. There's an argument for Stefan Bajcetic being part of Liverpool's strongest 11 at the moment, given the way things have gone. But just so many important players have been sidelined at wrong times, haven't they? Obviously, Diaz, we mentioned here, hasn't played since October. Diogo Jota's been in and out, more often out. That was his first half for 4.5 months on Saturday. Thiago, he got injured for a month, didn't he? First game of the season. Konate is another one. I think he's played 8 times in the Premier League. It's certainly not a lot.
I think he's only played about 320 minutes with Van Dijk, I think, this season. Yeah. So
there you go. Van Dijk obviously just come off 6 weeks. 6 weeks off himself. So pretty much everywhere you look, Liverpool have struggled with injuries, and sometimes it just feels like you're making excuses, but you were kind of looking for explanations, aren't we, as to why they've dropped off. And the performances at times have been awful, haven't they? We can't really cover that too much, but injuries have played a part to an extent. And it just feels like we just keep saying it. If Liverpool can get 1 or 2 players fit, then results will improve. But it just seems like it's, plug and leaks this season for Liverpool. You plug one and another one springs up, and now you're waiting on Konate. Hopefully, I mean, he was back in training last week, was he? Maybe Wednesday comes too early for him. He might have an outside chance for United on Sunday. We'll wait to see what Klopp says tomorrow. Diogo, he's going to be missing for another few weeks, isn't he? Diaz, not expected back imminently, but in a few weeks, there's still enough games to play for the injured players to still have a bit of an impact on this season. And I think it's a little bit unfair on expecting Diaz to come back and be at the sort of levels he's generally been at since he joined the club. But maybe he's just got enough about him to make a telling impact at some point down the line. We'll wait and see. There's still enough games left, but it does just feel like Liverpool have just, had one hand tied behind the back far too often this season with the amount of players that they've been unable to pick.
Yeah, just got to keep slogging away and trying to get the 1-0 wins, try and keep the clean sheets going. That certainly was one positive. Just before we go on and pick our teams for Wolves and Lynch, just in terms of the top four race, as we said before, still 15 games to go. How much hope have you got that Liverpool can do it? Are you feeling confident, or what's the sort of mood this week?
I definitely wouldn't say confident. I think there's just been too many poor performances this season, and it's just can they put that run together? Basically, we're asking them. I think to get in the top four, they have to do something they haven't done this season, which is probably, maybe win 5 on the balance at any point. I think I've said this a few times. I think that's sort of that's the thing that will maybe get them up ahead of Tottenham and allow themselves to get on a run. Then that will keep them there. Can they do it? I don't know. I think this is a big week. I said this at the top of the pod. I think, if you win your next 2, I think you really are convinced then. I think that Liverpool have turned a huge corner and that, they can put some sustained form together. I think a big factor in it as well is Gorst is right, really mentioned the injuries. That is huge. Because one of the biggest problems this season as well is not just they've lost players, but it's getting players back and then losing another player. And not being able to rotate as much, and then that's caused further injuries. So, if Canate comes back in now, does Van Dijk get another injury, or Robertson suddenly get one, or Liverpool need that to not happen. They need some sort of consistency in selection between now and the end of the season. They're not in all the competitions. They're going to be basically just playing Premier League games to the end of the season. So that should allow for them to pretty much pick a very similar team between now and the end of the season. I think if they do that, I've more faith that they can possibly get on a little run and make the top 4. But yeah, that again would still be dependent, I think, on I think they're probably going to win the next 2.
Yeah, I think that is a big advantage, isn't it? The fixtures, when you look at how many games Manchester United are going to play. Obviously, the Carabao Cup is finished, but they're still in Europe, still in the FA Cup. I'm not saying necessarily that Liverpool should be looking to catch them up, but it's going to be almost a similar situation to what Liverpool had last season, where they suddenly find themselves playing loads and loads of football, and maybe that is tested a little bit. But we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens against Wolves, and we'll come on to pick our team for that game now, Gorsty. I'll start with you. Are you expecting any changes across the back? Would you bring Ibrahim Konate back in if he is fit and ready to go, or would you be more tempted possibly to give him a little bit longer and make sure he's ready for the weekend's game with Manchester United?
Yeah, as tempting as it is, I'm going to stick with Matip. I thought he was terrible on Saturday, to be frank. Just looked so shaky in possession. Him and Trent on that right-hand side were not great at all, and I thought Van Dijk had to be very, very good to help them out, really. But I'd be mindful of rushing back Canate too soon and then getting injured again. I think he's going to be needed for Sunday if he's got any chance. So yeah, I'm sticking with the back 5.
Yeah, I think I'm reluctantly the same as you. I do wonder whether there might be a change at fullback, given it's 3 games in a week. Lynch, is there any sort of argument there, do you think? Would you try and bring Canate back? What are you thinking across the back 4?
I just think Matip's performance the other night is making me want to take a risk with Canate, to be honest. I think, and also I think, it'd be kind of nice to get some minutes in his legs before the Manchester United game. I just think, if you can, it'd be, they'll have a good idea, won't they, of whether it is a risk or not. It wasn't a massive layoff, so maybe there's a chance there he could come in for Wednesday and then do the Sunday after. I really hope so, because I think he's massive in terms of improving that back line. I think, not every problem that Liverpool has been personnel issue, but having him back in terms of just having that pace, defensive recovery pace there, and obviously him and Van Dijk are really smart partnership together, helping out Trent as well, and I think it helps both fullbacks when that's the centre half pair in there. So I really would like to see Konate back in, if it's possible, and the rest that maybe no other changes. Obviously, he brought Trent off, didn't he, against Crystal Palace, maybe thinking that he's going to protect him because he's got a lot of football to play and he has played a lot of football. But I think I think Trent and Robertson and every player who's fit is going to have to, whenever there is a midweek now between now and the end of the season, is going to have to do the midweek weekend thing, because you shouldn't have too many. I know there's more fixtures than they would usually fit in the Premier League schedule, but like you said, they're not in the cups. They don't have to worry about any of that. So you'd like to think that they could play these 15 games in the league and with a consistent side.
Yeah, certainly. Like you say, he took off Trent, didn't he, a little bit earlier. Maybe we'll see a little bit of that. You'd certainly rather see him maybe do 60, 70 minutes and then come off rather than not start in that game at all. But certainly be interesting. Let's move on to the midfield then, Gorsty. Who are you going to pick in the centre of the pitch?
I'm going to bring Stefan Bajcetic back in. And then I suppose it's simply a case of who's the least worst at the moment, which is a damning indictment, really.
Wow.
It's a hard choice as well.
That's what it feels like. Naby Keita, no chance. I'd be surprised if he starts another game again this season after Saturday night. He's kind of dwindling down his Liverpool career now, isn't he? Last final months. If he wants to remain a Liverpool player, he's not going the right way about showing it. I thought that was a pretty awful appearance from him on Saturday. Jordan Henderson and James Milner weren't much better. So I'll go with Bajcetic, Fabinho, and Henderson, I guess.
Yeah, I think I'm the same as you. I think Fabinho will come back in. Even he wasn't particularly great when he came off the bench and hasn't been recently. But I think he will probably have to come in. Lynch, are you the same three or any changes in there?
Yeah, I think the best the midfields looked in sort of possibly the entirety of the season was when, against Everton, when it was Bajcetic, Henderson and Fabinho. I just think that, maybe by some magic that they can put in another good performance together. I think Bajcetic being in there does lift things a little bit, not just because he's a quality young player, but also just that energy in there and maybe protecting others' legs a little bit more, filling gaps for them. And he's such a smart player. So, yeah, I'd really like to see him back in because I think he has to start against United as well. And yeah, that's as good as Liverpool have looked in midfield in recently. So hopefully they can sort of rediscover that again.
Yeah, I was considering trying to get Harvey Elliott into that midfield three, but I think you're both right. I think that the balance of it just looks a lot better when it's been the Fabinho, Henderson and Bajcetic. So I will we'll go with that as well. Let's move on to the forward line then, Gorsty. We mentioned before a few names and needing to get sharpness back. Which three are you going to go for up top?
Yeah, I think the important one is Nunez, isn't it? Whether he's cleared to play or not. He's obviously felt the effects of that shoulder injury at Newcastle, played through the pain barrier with the help of an injection against Real Madrid. So it's just a case of how that's healed up. I suppose Klopp will deliver an update tomorrow on that one. Let's say he is cleared to play. I'm going to start him on the left. I'm going to put Mo Salah on the right. I think it might be a good time to bring Firmino in, give him a first start since November.
Yeah, I can certainly see Roberto Firmino coming in. I think Darwin Nunez will start if he's fit. Lynchy, which way are you going to go with it?
Yeah, I kind of like that front three, to be honest. I think Firmino maybe coming back in would be a smart move. Gakpo's played an awful lot, hasn't he, since coming in? And I think he's been improving and showing real signs that he can be that sort of next Firmino type. It looks like it's really working that, and I know he will get better as well. But just maybe pull him out the firing line a little bit. Maybe then he comes in to start against Manchester United. And Firmino seems the direct swap, doesn't he? I know maybe he's going to be tempted to start Jota in there, but if you've got Nunez on the left hand side, Salah on the right, I think Firmino's the better fit in terms of allowing those two to play their natural game, which is go into central positions and him to drop off. He's been doing that for years, so I think I'd agree with that as a front three. I like that.
Yeah, certainly like the look of that. Those are our teams then. We'll quickly go around and do score predictions as well. I think I'll go 1-0 to Liverpool. I think it'll be another tight one, another close one. I think it might be a little bit like the West Ham game actually at Anfield a bit earlier on in the season, where Liverpool just have to grind it out, but they might just edge it. Gorsty, what do you reckon? How's it going to go?
Yeah, I think it might be something similar, really, where Liverpool win just by virtue of it being at Anfield in a way. The 3 games this season have been weird, haven't they? You know, hard fought 1-0 in the FA Cup. They got absolutely hammered at Molineux in the Premier League, and a sort of strange 2-2 game at Anfield in the FA Cup where they were lucky to go through, really, or lucky to take it to a replay. Yeah, probably just Liverpool 1-0. Maybe Mo Salah gets his 20th goal of the season. Maybe even a penalty. We haven't seen any of them, have we, this season? Certainly not in the Premier League, anyway.
Yeah, certainly it's going to be a tight one, Lynchy. What do you reckon?
Well, it's 3 clean sheets on the bounce, so I just can't see them keeping a 4th, to be honest. So I'm sort of minded to think that Wolves will maybe score, but to keep things positive, maybe, you know, if Nunez comes back as well, I think it adds in a lot more goal threat. So maybe Liverpool 2-1.
Good stuff. Wins all round. Hopefully those predictions do prove to be correct and Liverpool can pick up the 3 points. We'll, of course, have all of the coverage in all of the usual places. We'll be building up to Manchester United as well after Wednesday's game is out of the way. For now, though, we shall leave it there. Thanks to Paul and to David for joining me. And we'll catch you next time right here on the Blood Red channel.